Women, Caste and Reform. So, in this chapter, we will be talking about the harsh realities for women and lower caste in the 19th century India, like child marriage, sati, untouchability, okay? And it will also highlight the 19th to 20th century social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Jyoti Rao Phule, and Pandita Ramabai, who fought for women's education, widow remarriage, and caste equality, leading to gradual social changes and women's own movement for rights. So we will talk about all these things in this chapter, okay? So now let's start reading the chapter. Have you ever thought of how children lived about 200 years ago? Nowadays, most girls from middle class families go to school and often study with boys. On growing up, many of them go to colleges and universities and take up jobs after that. They have to be adults before they are legally married. Means they have to be at least 18 years of age before they are legally married. And according to law, they can marry anyone they like from any caste and community, and widows can remarry too. But see, earlier all these things were not possible. The girls they used to get married at a very less age, and a widow she can't remarry. Okay, so all women, like all men, can vote and stand for elections. Earlier, women were not allowed to vote. Of course, these rights are not actually enjoyed by all. Poor people have little or no access to education, and in many families, women cannot choose their husbands. Okay, still this happens. So, 200 years ago, things were very different. Most children were married off at an early age. Both Hindu and Muslim men could marry more than one wife. Okay, so they can marry as many times they want. In some parts of the country, widows were praised if they chose death by burning themselves on the funeral pyre of their husbands. Okay, and they were called sati. They used to be praised for that. Okay, so women who died in this manner, whether willingly or otherwise, were called sati, meaning virtuous women. Women's right to property were also restricted. Besides, most women had virtually no access to education. In many parts of the country, people believe that if a woman was educated, she would become a widow. Like, so they had a belief that if a girl will study, a woman will study, she will become a widow. Okay, widow is a person whose husband is no more. Okay. Figure 1. Sati painted by Balthazar Solvin, 1813. This was one of the many pictures of sati painted by the European artist who came to India. The practice of sati was seen as evidence of the barbarism of the East. Okay. Now, differences between men and women were not the only ones in society. In most regions, people were divided along lines of caste, so that was not the main concern. Difference between men and women. Caste difference was also there. So, Brahmins and Kshatriyas considered themselves as upper caste. So, there were in total four castes. Okay, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So, Brahmins and Kshatriyas considered themselves as the upper caste. Then, others such as traders and money lenders. After Kshatriyas were Vaishyas, so these were traders and moneylenders, were placed after them. Then came peasants and artists and artisans, such as weavers and potters, referred to as Shudras. So these were the lowest. Okay. Now at the lowest rung were those who labored to keep cities and villages clean or worked at jobs that upper caste considered polluting. That is, it would lead to the loss of caste status. The upper caste also treated many of these groups at the bottom as untouchables. So after the Shudras were untouchables. That was the lowest caste. Okay. So the untouchables, they were not allowed to enter temples, draw water from the wells used by the upper caste, or bathe in ponds where upper caste bathed. They were seen as inferior human beings. Okay, so they were seen as inferior at that time. So over the 19th and 20th centuries, many of these norms and perceptions slowly changed. Let us see how this happened. Now, how all these things happened? Obviously, many people have fought for this. They have worked for this. Okay. From the early 19th century, we find debates and discussions about social customs and practices taking on a new character. One important reason for this was the development of new forms of communication. Now, new forms of communication came in the form of books, newspapers, magazines, and people became more aware. Okay, they were more informed, right? So, because of this, because of the increased modes of communication, the changes came into effect, right? For the first time, Books, newspapers, magazines, leaflets, and pamphlets were printed. Now, pamphlets and leaflets, they were given to many people to, to educate them, to inform them about certain issues. So these are far cheaper and far more accessible than the manuscripts that you have read about in class 7. Therefore, ordinary people could read these, and many of them could also write and express their ideas in their own languages. And these all things were printed in their own languages, so they were able to read and write, right? And become more informed and educated. And also spread the word, right? Then all kinds of issues, social, political, economic, and religious, could now be debated and discussed by men, and sometimes by women as well in the new cities. The discussions could reach out to a wider public and could become linked to movements or social change. These debates were often initiated by Indian reformers and reform groups. Now, there were reformers and reform groups. So, one such reformer was Raja Ram Mohan Roy, 1772 to 1833. Now, he founded a reform association known as the Brahmo Samaj. Brahmo Sabha. Earlier it was known as Brahmo Sabha, later it was known as Brahmo Samaj in Calcutta. People such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy are described as reformers because they felt that changes were necessary in society and unjust practices need to be done away with. So, and Raja Ram Mohan Roy was also known as the father of modern India because he found, after founding this Brahmo Samaj, he has made so many developments in many areas related to women, right? That is why he was known as father of modern India. Because of him, many new things came into effect and many things are possible then. So they thought that the best way to ensure such changes was by persuading people to give up old practices and adopt a new way of life. Persuading means unko samjhana, unko manana, okay? And to give up the old practices which they already following and adopt a new way of life so that things could improve. So see, this is Rajaram Mohan Roy, this person figure 2. So Rajaram Mohan Roy was keen to spread the knowledge of Western education in the country and bring about greater freedom and equality for women. Now we all know that in the last chapter we have studied in Civilizing the Native chapter that Western education was like it will change the people. It will teach them. It will make them more informed about the science, the technology, what all things are going on in the society, what all they need to change themselves. Okay, so it will not just civilize them, it will not just educate them. It was said in the chapter, it will also make them more informed and make them a more skilled human being. Okay. He wrote about the way women were forced to bear the burden of domestic work, confined to the home and the kitchen, and not allowed to move out and become educated. So he rose that issue that women were forced to bear the burden of domestic work. Women were confined to home only, but that is not the only thing that women can do. They can also do other things, right? So changing the life of widows. Now I've already told you who widows are. So how he changed the life of widows. Rajaram Mohan Roy was particularly moved by the problems widows faced in their lives. He began a campaign against the practice of sati. Rajaram Mohan Roy was well versed in Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian and European languages. Okay, he tried to show through his writings that the practice of widow burning had no sanction in ancient texts. That it was not somewhere mentioned, it was not sanctioned by the ancient texts that women had to burn along with their husband at his funeral pyre. That was nowhere mentioned. Only the people have created these myths. So by the early 19th century, as you have read in chapter 7, many British officials had also begun to criticize Indian traditions and customs. They were therefore more than willing to listen to Ram Mohan, who was reputed to be a learned man. In 1829, sati was banned. So because of his efforts in 1829, sati was banned. And because of efforts of Rajaram Mohan Roy, his efforts led the British Governor General Lord William Bentinck to ban sati in 1829. That was banned by him. Okay. The strategy adopted by Ram Mohan was used by later reformers as well. Whenever they wished to challenge a practice that seemed harmful, they tried to find a verse or sentence in the ancient sacred texts that supported their point of view. They then suggested that the practice as it existed at present was against early tradition. See the figure 3, hook swinging festival. Now, in this popular festival, devotees underwent a peculiar form of suffering as part of ritual worship. Now, this they were doing intentionally with their own will. They were suffering this. They were keen for the suffering. See how bad the rituals were earlier. With hooks pierced through their skin, they swung themselves on a wheel. In the early 19th century, when European officials began criticizing Indian customs and rituals as barbaric, this was one of the rituals that came under attack. So this was also attacked, this ritual, by these reformers. See source 1. We first tie them down to the pile. Ram Mohan Roy published many pamphlets to spread his ideas. Some of these were written as a dialogue between the advocate and critic of a traditional practice. Here is one such dialogue on sati. Advocate of sati. Women are by nature of inferior understanding, without resolution, unworthy of trust. Many of them, on the death of their husbands, become desirous of accompanying them. But to remove every chance of their trying to escape from the blazing fire, in burning them, we first tie them down to the pile. See how bad it was that we will tie them along with the husbands and then they will burn. Okay. Opponent of sati. Now this was opponent of sati. When did you ever afford them a fair opportunity of exhibiting the natural capacity? How then can you accuse them of want of understanding? If after instruction and knowledge and wisdom a person cannot comprehend or retain what has been taught him, we may consider him as deficient. But if you do not educate women, how can you see them as inferior? Okay, so this was opponent of sati. Now, for instance, one of the most famous reformers, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, used the ancient text to suggest that widows could remarry. Okay, now he said that widows could remarry. There is no need of burning themselves. His suggestion was adopted by British officials and a law was passed in 1856 permitting widow remarriage. So Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, he made widow remarriage prevalent. Okay, and his persistence led to the Widow Remarriage Act of 1856. Those who were against the remarriage of widows opposed Vidyasagar and even boycotted him. Okay, boycotted means no one will talk to this person. This person is banned by every person of the community. By the second half of 19th century, the movement in favor of widow remarriage spread to other parts of the country. In the Telugu-speaking areas of the Madras Presidency, Veera Salingam Pantulu formed an association for widow remarriage. Now, this person he started in the South India, right? The same movement. Around the same time, young intellectuals and reformers in Bombay pledged themselves to working for the same cause. See, everywhere something or the other was going for the same thing. In the north, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who founded the reform association called Arya Samaj, also supported widow remarriage. See, this person is Swami Dayanand. Yet the number of widows who actually remarried remained low. Those who married were not easily accepted in society and conservative groups continued to oppose the new law. See, here you can also read that Dayanand founded Arya Samaj in 1875, an organization that attempted to reform Hinduism. Now, girls begin going to school. Now, widow remarriage thing sorted. Now, the education for girls. That was also another movement, another reform. Many of the reformers felt that education for girls was necessary in order to improve the condition of women. So, in order to improve the condition of women need to be educated so that they can earn, they can do something for themselves. Vidyasagar, this is Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, this person, figure 5. Vidyasagar and Calcutta and many other reformers in Bombay set up schools for girls. When the first schools were opened in the mid 19th century, many people were afraid of them. Now, the first school was opened in mid 19th century in Calcutta and Bombay. Okay. Now, many people had fear to send their girls to these schools while at sea. So they feared that schools would take girls away from home, prevent them from doing the domestic duties. Now, if they will go to school, then who will do the household work? So that will prevent them from their domestic duties because they were only meant to do household work. Moreover, girls had to travel through public places in order to reach school. Many people felt that this would have a corrupting influence on them. So if they will go out of home, that will have a corrupting influence on them. They can spoil themselves, okay, in other ways. They felt that girls should stay away from public places. They should only remain at home. They should be confined to home only. Therefore, throughout the 19th century, most educated women were taught at home by liberal fathers or husbands. Sometimes women taught themselves. Do you remember what you read about Raj Sundari Devi in your book Social and Political Life last year? She was one of those who correctly learned to read and write in the flickering light of candles at night. She studied from her son's book, if you remember, right? Then, in the latter part of the century, schools for girls were established by the Arya Samaj in Punjab and Jyotirao Phule in Maharashtra. Okay, so by Arya Samaj, schools were established in Punjab and by Jyotirao Phule in Maharashtra. In aristocratic Muslim households in northern India, women learned to read the Quran in Arabic. Aristocratic means high caste, okay, high social status. So in aristocratic Muslim households in North India, women learned to read the Quran in Arabic. They were taught by women who come home to teach. Some reformers such as Mumtaz Ali reinterpreted verses from the Quran to argue for women's education. So now another reformer came, Mumtaz Ali. The first Urdu novels began to be written from the late 19th century. Amongst other things, these were meant to encourage women to read about religion and domestic management in a language they could understand. See figure 6, you can see this. These are students of Hindu Mahila Vidyalaya 1875. When girls' schools were first set up in the 19th century, it was generally believed that the curriculum for girls ought to be less taxing than that for boys. The Hindu Mahila Vidyalaya was one of the first institutions to provide girls with the kind of learning that was usual for boys at that time. Women write about women. Now the next topic, okay. From the early 20th century, Muslim women like the Begums of Bhopal played a notable role in promoting education among women. They founded a primary school for girls at Aligarh. Another remarkable woman, Begum Ruqayya Shakhawat Hussain, started school for Muslim girls in Patna and Calcutta. Okay, so she started in two places. She was a fearless critic of conservative ideas, arguing that religious leaders of every faith accorded an inferior place for women. By the 1880s, Indian women began to enter universities. See now by 1880s, they began going to universities, right? That was such a good thing. Some of them trained to be as doctors. Some became teachers. Many women began to write and publish their critical views on the place of women in society. Tarabai Shinde, a woman educated at home at Pune, published a book, Sri Purush Tulna, a comparison between women and men. Okay, so you can well understand by the name only Sri Purush Tulna. Tulna is comparison. Criticizes the social differences between men and women. So she wrote this book. Then again came the next woman, Pandita Ramabai, a great scholar of Sanskrit, felt that Hinduism was oppressive towards women and wrote a book about the miserable lives of upper caste Hindu women. So the upper caste Hindu women also had miserable lives. They were confined to homes. They were not allowed to read and write, study. Okay. So she founded a widows' home at Pune to provide shelter to widows who had been treated badly by their husband's relatives. So when the husband dies, the women were treated very badly by the husband's relatives who were left behind. Here women were trained so that they could support themselves economically. So women can work and they can support themselves economically, financially. So they don't have to depend on husband relatives anymore then. Needless to say, all this more than alarmed the orthodox. For instance, many Hindu nationalists felt that Hindu women were adopting Western ways and that this would corrupt Hindu culture and erode family values. Orthodox Muslims were also worried about the impact of these changes. Okay, now many people, they were orthodox. Orthodox means they were of the earlier, thinking only. So they used to think that these women will adopt Western ways and then they will corrupt the Hindu culture, and they will also forget family values, right? But this was not, this never happened. As you can see, by the end of 19th century, women themselves were actively working for reform. They wrote books, edited magazines, founded schools and training centers, and set up women's associations. From the early 20th century, they formed political pressure groups to push through laws for female suffrage, means the right to vote, and better healthcare and education for women. Some of them joined various kinds of nationalist and socialist movements from the 1920s. And now some of the women, they also entered the politics. They joined the nationalist and socialist movements also to bring about changes. They joined all these reform groups. In the 20th century, leaders such as Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose lent their support to demands for greater equality and freedom for women. Now came Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose. They lent their support to demands for greater equality and freedom for women. So women should also be treated equally. Nationalist leaders promised that there would be full suffrage for all men and women after independence. Full suffrage means right to vote, full right to vote for all men and women. However, till then they asked women to concentrate on the anti-British struggle. Now see this box, Law Against Child Marriage. With the growth of women's organizations and writings on these issues, the momentum for reform gained strength. People challenged another established custom, that of child marriage. There were a number of Indian legislators in the Central Legislative Assembly who fought to make a law preventing child marriage. In 1929, the Child Marriage Restraint Act was passed without the kind of bitter debates and struggles that earlier laws had seen. Now, Child Remarriage Restraint Act was also passed in 1929, and this didn't require many debates or discussions. That was done very easily. According to the act, no man below the age of 18 and woman below the age of 16 could marry. Okay, so before 16, no girl can marry. Subsequently, these limits were raised to 21 for men and 18 for women. So earlier it was 18 for women and 21 for men. So this is a picture of a bride at the age of 8. This girl is only 8 years of age. This is a picture of a child bride at the beginning of the 20th century, earlier when there was nothing like this movement or reform. Did you know that even today over 20% of girls in India are married below the age of 18? Caste and social reform. Some of the social reformers we have been discussing also criticize caste inequalities. Now come the inequality relating to caste. So we have discussed about women education, about the practice of sati, about the abolition of child marriage act. Then remarriage act was passed. Now comes the caste inequality. Caste and social reform. Some of the social reformers we have been discussing also criticize caste inequalities. Now come the movement for caste inequality. Okay. Ram Mohan Roy translated an old Buddhist text that was critical of caste. The Brahmo Samaj adhered to the tradition of bhakti that believed in spiritual equality of all castes. If you remember, we have done this chapter also, devotional paths to the divine. There we have studied about bhakti. So that emphasizes on spiritual equality of all castes. Okay, in Bombay, the Paramhans Mandli was founded in 1840 to work for the abolition of caste. Now comes the movement for abolition of caste. Many of these reformers and members of reform associations are people of upper castes. Okay, often in secret meetings, these reformers would violate caste taboos on food and touch in an effort to get rid of the hold of caste prejudice in their lives. These were also others who questioned the injustices of the caste social order. During the course of the 19th century, Christian missionaries began setting up schools for tribal groups and lower caste children. These children were thus equipped with some resources to make their way into a changing world. So these Christian missionaries began setting up schools for tribal groups and also lower caste children. That now they will also be educated and they will change the world. At the same time, the poor began leaving their villages to look up for jobs that were opening up in the cities. So the people started migrating from villages to the cities in search of new and better jobs, better employment opportunities. There was work in the factories that were coming up and jobs in municipalities. So there in cities they used to find good work. You have read about the expansion of cities in chapter 6. Think of the new demands of labor thus created. Drains had to be dug, roads laid, buildings constructed, and cities cleaned. This requires coolies, diggers, carriers, bricklayers, sewage cleaners, sweepers, palanquin bearers, rickshaw pullers. So there were a lot of employment opportunities for people. Where did this labor come from? The poor from the villages and small towns, many of them from low caste, began moving to the cities where there was a new demand for labor. Some also went to work in plantations in Assam and Mauritius, Trinidad and Indonesia. Work in the new locations was often very hard, but the poor, the people for lower caste, saw this as an opportunity to get away from the oppressive hold that upper caste landowners exercised over their lives and daily humiliation they suffered in their villages. Okay, see, this is figure 9, a coolie ship, 19th century. This coolie ship named John Allen carried many Indian laborers to Mauritius where they did a variety of forms of hard labor. Many of these laborers were from low castes. So they were looking to prevent all this, the humiliation from the upper caste. So that is why they moved to other places in search of jobs and money. Who could produce shoes? Leather workers had been traditionally held in contempt since they work with dead animals which are seen as dirty and polluting because the leather is obtained from the skin of animals. Okay, so during the First World War, however, there was a huge demand for shoes for the armies. Caste prejudice against leather work meant that only the traditional leather workers and shoemakers were ready to supply army shoes. Okay, so the who were traditionally doing this, they were only ready to supply these army shoes. So they could ask for high prices and gain impressive profits. Okay, now because there was a huge demand for these army shoes at that time, so they can demand for high prices. Okay, see this figure 10. Madigas making shoes, 19th century Andhra Pradesh. Madigas were an important untouchable caste of present day Andhra Pradesh. They were experts in cleaning hides, tanning them for use, and sewing sandals. There were other jobs too. The army, for instance, offered opportunities. A number of Mahar people, Mahar is also an untouchable caste, and also, if you, I will tell you from this Mahar caste, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he also belongs from this caste. So, a number of Mahar people who were regarded as untouchable found jobs in the Mahar regiment, the army regiment, right? The father of B.R. Ambedkar, the leader of the Dalit movement, taught at an army school. Okay, see, no place inside the classroom. In the Bombay Presidency, as late as 1829, untouchables were not allowed into even government schools. When some of them pressed hard for that right, they were allowed to sit on the veranda outside the classroom and listen to the lessons without polluting the room where upper caste boys were taught. So even if they were allowed to study, so they used to sit outside the classroom because they can't enter the classroom where upper caste are studying and they are not allowed to pollute the classroom because that was used to believe that they will pollute. Okay. See this figure 11. Dublas of Gujarat carrying mangoes to the market. Dublas labored for upper caste landowners, cultivating their fields and working at a variety of odd jobs at the landlord's house. Demand for equality and justice. Gradually, by the second half of the 19th century, people from within the non Brahman caste began organizing movements against caste discrimination and demanded social equality and justice. The Satnami movement in central India was founded by Ghasidas who worked among the leather workers and organized a movement to improve the social status. In eastern Bengal, Haridas Thakur's Matwa sect worked among Chandala cultivators. Haridas questioned Brahmanical texts that supported the caste system. In what is present day Kerala, Guru from Ezhava caste, Sri Narayan Guru proclaimed the ideals of unity for his people. He urged against treating people unequally on the basis of caste differences. Children, please learn all these names from different places, okay? According to him, all humankind belong to the same caste. He says that all are equal, all belong to the same caste, no upper, no lower. One of his famous statements was Oru Jati, Oru Matam, Oru Daivam, Manush Yanu means one caste, one religion, one God for mankind. All these sects were founded by leaders who come from non Brahman caste and work amongst them. They try to change those habits and practices which provoke the contempt of dominant castes. They try to create a sense of self esteem among the subordinate castes. Now, Gulamgiri. Gulamgiri means doing gulami, doing being a servant of something. Gulami means obeying whatever the person says. One of the most vocal among the low caste leaders was Jyotirao Phule, who was born in 1827. He studied in schools set up by Christian missionaries. On growing up, he developed his own ideas about the injustices of caste society. He set out to attack the Brahmins' claim that they were superior to others since they were Aryans. Fully argued that the Aryans were foreigners who came from outside the subcontinent and defeated and subjugated the true children of the country, those who had lived here for before coming of the Aryans. As the Aryans established their dominance, they began looking at the defeated population as inferior, as low caste. Okay, so according to him, he argued that Brahmins were Aryans, foreigners who had subjugated the original inhabitants, who are now, dominating the original inhabitants, and they became the upper caste. But they are the foreigners. They are not originally from our society, not originally from the country. Okay, so as the Aryans established their dominance, they began looking at the defeated population as inferior, as low caste people. According to Fulle, the upper caste had no right on to the land and power. In reality, the land belonged to this indigenous people, the so-called low caste. He says that the land, original land of their place belongs to them, to these indigenous people, not to the upper caste who call themselves as Aryans. Okay, the land belongs to these lower castes only. Fully claimed that before Aryan rule there existed a golden age when warrior peasants tilled the land and ruled the Maratha countryside in just and fair ways. He proposed that Shudras, labouring caste, and Atishudras, untouchables, should unite to challenge caste discrimination. Okay, so he urged for this. Then he formed the Satya Shodhak Samaj, meaning society of truth seekers. Satya is truth. Okay, and he also wrote a book, Gulamgiri, Slavery, in 1873, which linked the struggle of Indian lower caste with that of black slaves in America. The Satya Shodhak Samaj, an association Phule founded, propagated caste equality. In 1873, Phule also wrote a book named Gulamgiri, meaning slavery. Some 10 years before this, the American Civil War had been fought, leading to the end of slavery in America. So Phule dedicated his book to all those Americans who had fought to free slaves, thus establishing a link between the conditions of lower caste in India and the black slaves in America. As this example shows, Fuller extended his criticism of the caste system to argue against all forms of inequality. He was concerned about the plight of upper caste women, the miseries of the laborer, and the humiliation of the low caste. This movement for caste reform was continued in the 20th century by other great Dalit leaders like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in Western India and E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar in the South. Okay, so then B.R. Ambedkar in North India and then E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar in the South. Please learn these, children. B.R. Ambedkar in Western India, sorry, not North India. Then this source 4. We are also human beings. In 1927, Ambedkar said, we now want to go to the tank only to prove that, like others, we are also human beings. Hindu society should be reorganized on two main principles, equality and absence of casteism. The gateway to Madurai temple drawn by Thomas Daniel, 1792. See this. Figure 14. See this. This is a temple, Madurai temple, and untouchables were not allowed anywhere near such gateways until the temple entry movement began. Now comes the temple entry. Who could enter temples? Now Ambedkar was born into a Mahar family, okay, which is an untouchable caste. As a child, he experienced that caste prejudice meant in everyday life. In the school, he was forced to sit outside the classroom on the ground, and he was not allowed to drink water from taps that upper caste children used. After finishing school, he got a fellowship to go to US for higher studies. So on his return to India in 1919, he wrote exclusively about upper caste power in contemporary society, in society like ours. In 1927, Ambedkar started a temple entry movement. Now, a temple entry movement started because earlier the people they were not allowed to enter the temples. Now, this movement started in 1927, in which his Mahar caste followers participated. Brahman priests were outraged when the Dalits used water from the temple tank. Ambedkar led three such movements for temple entry between 1927 and 1935. Okay. His aim was to make everyone see the people of caste prejudices within society. Now comes the non-Brahman movement. In the early 20th century, the non-Brahman movement started. The initiative came from those non-Brahman castes that had acquired access to education, wealth, and influence. They urged that Brahmins were heirs of Aryan invaders from the north who had conquered southern lands from the original inhabitants of the region, the indigenous Dravidian races. They also challenged Brahmanical claims to power. E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, or Periyar as he was called, came from a middle class family. Interestingly, he had been an ascetic in his early life and had studied Sanskrit scriptures carefully. So, ascetic is a person who is very self disciplined. Okay. Later, he became a member of the Congress only to leave it in disgust when he found that at a feast organized by nationalists, seating arrangements followed caste distinctions. That is, the lower caste were made to sit at a distance from the upper caste. Convinced that untouchables had to fight for the dignity, Periyar founded the self respect movement. Okay. He urged that untouchables were the true upholders of the original Tamil and Dravidian culture, which had been subjugated by Brahmins. He felt that all religious authorities saw social divisions and inequality as God given. Okay? Untouchables had to free themselves, therefore, from all religions in order to achieve social equality. Periyar was an outspoken critic of Hindu scriptures, especially the codes of Manu, the ancient lawgiver, and the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. He said that these texts had been used to establish the authority of Brahmins over lower castes and the domination of men over women. So he used to say that these texts they used to teach people that women are lower than men. The caste inequalities also emerge from all these texts. He said. These assertions did not go unchallenged. The forceful speeches, writings, and movements of low caste leaders did lead to rethinking and some self criticism among upper caste nationalist leaders. But Orthodox Hindu society also reacted by founding Sanatan Dharma Sabhas and the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal in the north, and associations like the Brahman Sabha in Bengal. The object of these associations was to uphold caste distinctions as a cornerstone of Hinduism and show this was sanctified by scriptures. Debates and struggles over caste continued beyond the colonial period and are still going on in our times. Okay. Organizing for reform. The Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmo Samaj, founded in 1830, prohibited all forms of idolatry and sacrifice, believed in the Upanishads, and forbade its members from criticizing other religious practices. It critically drew upon the ideals of religions, especially of Hinduism and Christianity, looking at the negative and positive dimensions. So this is Keshub Chandra Sen, one of the main leaders of Brahma Samaj. Derozio and Young Bengal. Henry Louis Vivian Derozio, a teacher at Hindu College, Calcutta in the 1820s, promoted radical ideas and encouraged his pupils to question all authority. Referred to as Young Bengal movement, his students attacked tradition and custom, demanded education for women, and campaigned for the freedom of thought and expression. So Derozio and Young Bengal, Derozio, he began all these movements. See, this is Henry Derozio. Then comes the Ramkrishna Mission and Swami Vivekananda. So this is Swami Vivekananda, we all know him. The Ramkrishna Mission and Swami Vivekananda. Named after Ramkrishna Paramhans, Swami Vivekananda's guru, the Ramkrishna Mission stressed the ideal of salvation through social service and selfless action. He says you can achieve salvation through social service and selfless actions. Swami Vivekananda, 1863 to 902, whose original name was Narendra Nath Dutta, combined the simple teachings of Sri Ramkrishna with his well-founded modern outlook and spread them all over the world. After hearing him in the World Parliament of Religions at Chicago in 1893, the New York Herald reported, "We feel how foolish it is to send missionaries to this learned action." Indeed, Swami Vivekananda was the first Indian in modern times who re-established the spiritual preeminence of Vedanta philosophy on a global scale. But his vision was not simply to talk of religion. He was extremely pained at the poverty and the misery of his countrymen. He firmly believed that any reform could become successful only by uplifting the condition of the masses. Okay, any reform can only be successful if the condition of the people is improved. Because if the people are so poor, they are living a miserable life, they are not concerned about any kind of revolution. They are just concerned how to fill their stomachs by the end of the day. Therefore, his clarion call to the people of India was to rise above the narrow confines of the religion of the kitchen and come together in the service of the nation. So come and do something for the nation. By sending out this call, he made a signal contribution to the nascent nationalism of India. His sense of nationalism was, however, not narrow in its conception. He was convinced that many of the problems facing the mankind could only be overcome if the nations of the world come together on an equal footing. Okay, come together on equal perception, equal communication, right? Equally, everything is following the same rules and regulations, right? They should have equal footing. Therefore, his exhortation to the youth was to unite on the basis of a common spiritual heritage. In this exhortation, he became truly the symbol of a new spirit and a new source of strength for the future. The Prarthana Samaj. Now, this was another movement established in 1867 at Bombay. The Prarthana Samaj sought to remove caste restrictions, abolish child marriage, encourage the education of women, and end the ban on widow remarriage. Its religious meetings drew upon Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian texts. The Veda Samaj. Established in Madras, Chennai in 1864, the Veda Samaj was inspired by the Brahmo Samaj. It worked to abolish caste distinctions and promote widow remarriage and women's education. Its members believed in one God. They condemned the superstitions and rituals of Orthodox Hinduism. Then the Aligarh movement. The Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, founded by Syed Ahmad Khan in 1875 at Aligarh, later became the Aligarh Muslim University. The institution offered modern education, including Western science, to Muslims. The Aligarh movement, as it was known, had an enormous impact in the area of educational reform. So this is Syed Ahmad Khan. Then comes the Singh Sabha movement. Reform organizations of the Sikhs. The first Singh Sabhas were formed at Amritsar in 1873 and at Lahore in 1879. The Sabhas sought to rid Sikhism of superstitions, caste distinctions, and practices seen by them as non-Sikh. They promoted education among the Sikhs, often combining modern instruction with Sikh teachings. So this is Khalsa College at Amritsar, established in 1892 by the leaders of Singh Sabha movement. Okay. Then comes the, see, elsewhere also we will read black slaves and white planters. You have read about how Jyotirao Phule established a connection in his book Gulamgiri between caste oppression and the practice of slavery in America. What was the system of slavery? Now, from the time that European explorers and traders landed in Africa in the 17th century, a trade in slaves began. Black people were captured and brought from Africa to America, sold to white planters, and made to work on cotton and other plantations, most of them in the southern United States. In the plantations, they had to work long hours, typically from dawn to dusk, punished for inefficient work, and whipped and tortured. Many people, white and black, opposed slavery through organized protest. In doing so, they invoked the spirit of American Revolution of 1776, exhorting, "See your Declaration, Americans. Do you understand your own language?" In his moving Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln held that those who had fought slavery had done so for the cause of democracy. He urged the people to strive for racial equality so that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. This is figure 21, slave sale. South Carolina, USA. 1856. See here, the slaves were brought and they were sold. Okay. So now we will come to the end of this chapter, and I will post these exercises in the next video. Thank you.